Hey, Carl and Richard here with your 2024 NDC schedule.
We'll be at as many NDC conferences as possible this year, and you should consider attending no matter what. The Copenhagen Developers Festival happens August 26th through the 30th. Tickets at cphdevfest.com.
NDC Porto is happening October 14th through the 18th. The early bird discount ends June 14th. Tickets at ndcporto.com.
We'll see you there. We hope. Hey, guess what? It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
Vishwas Lele is here with us, and we're excited to talk to him. How are you doing, my friend? Seen any otters this year?
So, yeah, well, the otters are everywhere, right? It's been summer up on the coast, so it's hard to be unhappy up here. But we got the kayaks out, cleaned them up, did some repairs, all the things you need to do, and then you get to go, meet the otters where they are.
How's that? Do they taste good?
Well, they think... No, they don't. They smell and they smell terrible. But no, don't eat otter. That's not a good. Eating carnivores in general, not a good idea. Don't
not
do
a
that.
good idea. Yeah.
But no, they got a stink all their own, man. Like it's not hard to find an otter den. You'll smell it first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no such things to report.
But summer at your place means barbecue, right? Like the grills are running.
I just bought 2 new 1200 watt subwoofers for the band.
Well, you're that kind of guy. You guys have been playing up a tornado these days. I mean, I only see it from your calendar. I could keep seeing every Friday, every Saturday blocked out through the summer.
One of the guys that saw us at Ocean Beach just sent me like 15 videos that he took of us playing out there. I don't know what to do with them. They're little clips, You
put them on TikTok, dude. Well, that's what the hip kids do.
I guess, yeah. While it still exists. Right?
Yeah. It's not going away. It's just a question of who's going to own it.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the reality.
All right. Well, I have something really funny and very cool from our friend Simon Kropp for Better Know Framework. Roll the music.
All right, man, what do you got?
I love Simon. Simon's an Aussie, and he comes up with really great stuff. Every once in a while, he crosses the line into comedy, which is also always helpful. But he's got this tool called Waffle Generator.
Does it make waffles?
Well, in a way, produces text, which on first glance looks like real ponderous prose, replete with cliches. So this is like, your lorem ipsum, if you just want text to fill up the screen, instead of using random Latin.
Is this lorem ipsum in the large language model era? Is that what this is? Oh, no.
Yeah, so this is great. Look at the example content on the GitHub repo.
This sounds like stuff I might say.
The aesthetic of economico-social disposition. Quote, in this regard, the underlying surrealism of the take-home message should not divert attention from the aesthetic of economico-social disposition. Humphrey Yokomoto in the Journal of the Total Entitative Item. And then there's some, on any rational basis, a particular factor, such as the functional baseline, the analogy of object, the strategic requirements, or the principle overriding programming, provides an interesting insight into the complementary functional derivation. This trend may dissipate due to the measurable proficiency. Complete and utter nonsense, but it sounds good.
This is LLM degeneration, tuned for a purpose.
It's so awesome. So
it's hilarious.
So he basically, get this, he has a Blazor wrapper around it.
Of course he does.
Guess what it's called? Blazing Waffles.
Blazing Waffles. Oh my God. Simon.
So awesome.
Brilliant.
So awesome.
Well, if you need to make text.
Yeah, he's also got an extension for Bogus to use Waffle Generator, which is great.
Okay.
So good.
Yeah.
He must be stopped, though, sometimes. I got to ask him about this. What?
I'm usually the one who says stuff like that. He must be stopped.
What do you think of that, Vishwas?
Love it.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. Every time we get something that's both a functional tool that we're going to use and makes us laugh.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect better know framework.
That's a good day. It's a good day every time. No question.
All right. So who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment of shows 1904, the one we shot back at Build with Mark Brown. We were talking about Cosmos DB and its role in large language models like ChatGPT and others, the role of AI in Cosmos DB in general. And our friend Brent Vandermeed had this comment. He said,
"Oh yeah,
thanks for the post-traumatic event at minute 32. Carl talks about trying to put together training on artificial intelligence. Be patient for the tools coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And Carl says, this stuff is changing so fast. This is not the time. We just got to wait it out and see what the major tools shake out like. And I said, it only gets easier. And Carl said, you could imagine going into a training class like right before Windows came out and someone teaching you to write your own windowing system.
Yep. Exactly what I was thinking.
And Brent says,
that was my point. That's why I said we shouldn't be doing this.
Just hang on. Yeah. And Brent comes back with, I immediately was thrown back into setting up a 3-tier Team Foundations on-premises server cluster. If only the rapid changes were occurring back then. And how people were willing to suffer setting up Jenkins pipelines for automation into AWS.
Oh,
man, am I happy with AKS, Helm, Terraform, Azure DevOps, and GitHub Actions. Thanks for the great show. I mean, it's a great example. Think about how many shows we did talking about continuous integration back in the day, sort of building your own tool set, this bespoke pipeline. And today, it's a set of services, right? You turn them on, right? And you've got it set up even as IaaS, as infrastructure as code. So you're able to just really run a script. It's like, there's my pipeline. Let's go.
We set up CI for many people, many companies back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a whole business, You're right. The folks that would specialize in just getting that right for you. So you didn't have to figure it out. Brent, I'm pretty sure you got a copy of Music to Code by, but we'll hook you up with something cool. Give me a ring at richard@pwop.com. Thanks so much for your comment. And a copy of Music to Code by is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code by, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code by.
Very good. And, you can always follow us on X Twitter, as I call it, but we've been there for many years. But the cool kids are hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot. Rudy toot toot. Rudy tooty fresh and fruity. And the last time Vishwas Lele was on, we had such a great conversation. And I was under the impression that, I said to him, you were on just like a month or two ago. It was 9 months ago.
Yeah.
I don't feel 9 months older, but obviously I am.
Been pretty crazy. And first show is all the way back in 2007, right? Like he's been.
Oh, yeah. He's an OG.
Pretty sure we owe him a sub sandwich at this point.
Or something, yeah. So his title has changed. He is now co-founder and CEO at pwin.ai.
Ooh.
He's also a noted industry speaker and author and the regional director for Washington, D.C. Welcome back, Vishwas.
Thank you both. Glad to be back.
A new job, dude. What are you doing? You've been AIS CTO for 10, 15 years?
Yeah, almost 16 years.
Yeah.
I've worked at AIS for almost 30 years. So quite a big change here since the last.
But it does seem to me like you're not alone either. Some really great tech people I know are jumping into AI startups. Like it's the hip thing to do right now. It's such a massive opportunity.
Yeah. So Richard, I was not, when we started on this idea, I was not envisioning, if you asked me like 9 months ago, what was your plan? The plan was whenever a new technology like Azure OpenAI or OpenAI comes along, we've always had this culture of can we find a few people, jump into it, try to understand it, try to build something so that we can understand it better and take it to our customers. I mean, that's what we are planning to do. And with Azure OpenAI, we went through a bunch of use cases and then said, hey, can we work on a use case which can help our internal folks? We have a pretty sizable proposal team. So can we build something that can help you? So we built something. And then we took it out to other people, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. So really, because you were making things that people wanted, it's like, this is actually a product and we should do more of it.
Yeah. So what we did, Richard, was first we built an MVP for our internal teams and got some feedback from them. Some good, some bad, all of it. And then we said, okay, let's do this. Can we, before we build any more functionality into this, can we go to 8 or 10 companies? They ended up going to a dozen or so companies and said, would you allow us to generate some content for you? And we'll talk about this later, but this is a copilot for proposal writers. So we went to a bunch of companies and said, can we generate the first draft of a proposal for you? Maybe 8 or 10 companies.
It's going to be called the aesthetic of economico-social disposition. You're going to love it.
So
sorry.
That's great. No.
Dash waffle false.
So we said, okay, we took it to 8 or 10 companies and they got some feedback. And what I learned from it, Richard, to your point, a lot of people were jumping in, and as they should. This is definitely a disruptive technology. I can feel it from early on in the SharePoint days. You remember 2007 show, getting into SharePoint, or remember the cloud show, early days. This seems like much, much bigger than all of those things combined. And there's this idea that you have technology that can reason on your behalf. Forget the content generation pieces, right? Forget that it can summarize text for you. But the fact that it can reason, given some things, it can reason and give you an output back. Think about it. Has applicability all across what we do in IT. But we took one use case, and maybe in hindsight, if I think about it, you can do a lot with generative AI, but the generative AI models are hard to sort of control. They're good, but how do you get them to focus in and generate 1, 20, 30, 40-page document?
Right.
And that has an ROI associated with that because,
sure, those are time-consuming to build.
Yes, they're time-consuming to build. So I think in hindsight, picking one use case which aligned well with the superpower of generative AI, which is to generate content,
right?
But then to solve a problem where people were struggling, writing this content, and then generating the first draft. And it is important to note that it is a copilot, very much using the term copilot.
Yeah, so you're still the pilot. It's your fault.
It's still your fault. Yes. We are just getting you to this first draft. And later on in the show, I can talk about, as a CTO, as an architect, I have supported proposal writing for at least 2 decades.
Right.
And I can talk about all of the trouble and trial and tribulation supporting that, and then how that product helps with all of those challenges that the organizations face.
So let's go off to, I'm all about the summarization, pulling existing content. Like, I get that from a large language model, but you talked about reasoning.
Yes.
Where is the reasoning needed, and how does the tool do it?
Yeah. So the reasoning is needed because let's just, Richard, if it's okay, I'll take a step back and sort of describe the problem, and then we can talk about how we solved it, right? So I remember 9 months ago, as we were ending that show, at that time, M365 Copilot had not come out, or it was
it was just being talked about.
I think available in limited preview or something like that. And Richard, I remember vividly that you asked a question that if you're generating the content based on your past responses, right? And let's say you've submitted 20, 30, 40 RFP submissions in the past. Right. You stored them into a SharePoint site, perhaps. Now your M365 Copilot has now scanned those documents, and you're now able to go and say, hey, generate me an answer to this question. And you, at that point, said, why would I not use M365 Copilot for that, right? Why do you need a special purpose Copilot to do what M365 Copilot seems to be doing out of the box? That was the question.
Proposes to do. Yeah, nobody really knew at that point.
Right. And the answer to that question is that M365 Copilot is a very good general purpose chat. You give it tons and tons of content, could be any content in your SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, what have you, and now you can use the graph connector to pull in content from anywhere else. You want to bring data from Salesforce, you can do that. But the fact is that it is a general purpose chatbot where the content is broken up, and let's say there's some sort of a chunking strategy. You chunk it by the page numbers, or you chunked it by the discussion, or you chunk it by sections. You chunk it some way, you store it in a vector database, and there are lots and lots of them available. But then you are asking a question that, hey, based on the information you have, can you answer this question, right? And it goes about answering that question. Now keep in mind that chatbot, including ChatGPT, are System 1 chatbot. And what do I mean by System 1? I'm really talking about the famous book from Daniel Kahneman.
System 1, System 2. Yeah.
System 1, System 2. Exactly. I'm talking about
fast and slow. Yeah.
Right. And it is.
Can you elaborate on that, Vishwas, a little bit?
I'll elaborate
I don't know what you guys
are
talking about.
Yeah. So there's a famous book by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow. Highly recommend folks read it.
Very good book to read. Yeah.
Very good book. Really talked about two things. And this book came out many, many years ago, well before ChatGPT was a thing. But in this book, they talk about System 1 and System 2. System 1, think of that as the way your brain works that allows you to avoid a ditch, right? You don't have to think too much. You instinctively take a reaction. System 2 is when you're thinking about
reptile
the
brain takes over.
So ChatGPT and other chatbots today are System 1, right? You can go up to ChatGPT and say, I'm going to ask you a question, but this is a really detailed question. I want you to think about it for 30 minutes and then only respond. There's no way to do that. It starts responding in 3 seconds or whatever the latency is.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about a special purpose chatbot, in this case, in the case of proposals, you really have to think about the proposal domain, think about the important entities in the proposal domain. As you look through past documents, you need to collate them in a certain entities which are very domain specific. And then when you're generating a response to a question, there are some best practices that are available out there in terms of how do you write persuasive content, right? And how do you reason about, so these questions can be long form questions, open-ended questions in RFPs. Like we have this problem about modernization and this system needs to be modernized and these are the challenges we are running into. It could be anything, right? I'm just giving you an IT example. It could be a healthcare example. It could be something else. So these are questions that you have to respond to. They're very broad-based questions, but then there are best practices in terms of how you write persuasive text in responding to that question. And that's where the reasoning comes in, where our domain-specific Copilot understands some of these best practices.
Yeah.
When it ingests the content, it automatically organizes them based on the entities. Things like that.
I can make an analogy here.
Yep.
If you go to ChatGPT to ask it for a problem and how to configure this middleware or whatever, right? You're taking a chance whether it's going to assume that you're using startup CS or program CS, right? A .NET 6 and before version of ASP.NET Core, or the newer modern stuff. And if it understood this, there would be another layer before it started spitting this stuff out that said, oh, we have this context that says it should know we are using .NET 8 and we're using the latest version of C# and we want to, frame the answer in that context. Right.
So that's setting up a system prompt and making sure that ChatGPT or any language model has the right context so that it can give you an answer that is very much aligned with your background and your needs. I'm also talking about, Carl, a scenario where in some cases, you're trying to answer a question. So let's just take that IT example, and I think that'll appeal to the listeners here as well. So there's a question about some government agency or some enterprise issued an RFP with a question. about modernization of some data platform, right? And they talked about, hey, this platform needs to be modernized. How do you go about, have you done this kind of work before? How do you go about solving this problem? Again, I'm oversimplifying this, but let's say that's the RFP, right? So in this case, we would have to go find out if you have done this kind of work as an organization, right? And then we will have to search through your past RFP responses, your core competencies. Maybe you've written some white papers, you've written blogs, you have transcriptions of podcasts and things like that. We go look through that, and that's a common RAG pattern that I'm talking about that people are familiar with. But we have to go find a couple of examples, or maybe 3 examples of where we have done this kind of data modernization work, right? So you get back text which says, well, these 3 examples match somewhat the requirement of the RFP. But then the reasoning comes in, how good a match is this, right? Should we use this as an example? If it is not a good match, should we be changing our prompt and looking for a different kind of an answer? So all of that is happening dynamically in runtime. And we are not asking our users to write any of the prompts, right? We are essentially generating all of the prompts for them based on the best practices that I talked about, right? And there's an interesting inverted ratio that we have learned about. So if we are generating a 20-page document, in many cases, we end up generating 200 pages. That's the inverted ratio of prompts, which includes all of the prompts and the context that we are feeding into the language model.
I mean, that's not that weird when it comes to a good search string, even. Like when you focus in on a specific thing you need to know, you have to be very descriptive to get the answer.
That's right. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's useful for folks to also understand you're in Washington, D.C. Like you guys are in the business of writing RFPs for government, which tend to be lengthy and have very specific rules. Like it's not a trivial thing.
It is not a trivial thing. There is a multi-100-page document called the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which talks about all of the details of an RFP, what would go in section M, what would go in section L, section C, things like that. So there are rules around that.
And this, I mean, I think a language model will be good at, given this rule set and this goal and these capabilities, write me the paragraphs.
Right. And what we are finding is as good as these language models are, just like human beings, if you tell them 12 things to do, they will do the first, second, and then we will do the 11th and 12th and forget everything in the middle.
Everything in between. That's so. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting.
But it does sound like in building this RFP generator, you literally want to go section to section and write a separate prompt for each one.
That's right.
Effectively. Although, again, because the rule set's so consistent, you should be able to generate almost all of this.
Right. So let me actually take you back into the day in the life of a technical architect or an engineer like me who was supporting RFPs, and then we'll come back to this point. So I'll try to be very quick here. So let's say an RFP arrives. It's a 50, 60, or 100-page PDF, which is non-trivial to read. Somebody has to read it.
This is the request for you to propose to them.
This is the request.
Yep. Your proposal will be larger.
Although in some cases they want you to write they have very strict page limits into how much you can write.
Right. Oh no, they can send you as many pages as they want, but you can only send them
certain pages. You can only, and then all the tricks about creating really dense diagrams to sort of save on words comes into play. But let's just say you got a 50-page complicated RFP. Now some human being has to read that and understand what is happening in this RFP. And then let's say they spend a day or two to figure out. And then they organize a meeting where they invite different people. There's a proposal manager, there's a technical SME, there is an account team, right? There is no point in responding to an RFP if you don't know anything about that customer. That is a general rule. That's not just in government. That's a general rule, right?
Yeah.
Why waste? There's no prize for the second and third and fourth place based on your response, right? So you have to read that. You organize a meeting, and they present what is requested in the RFP, and then somebody like me an engineer would join that meeting and say, yes, we can do this. This is SharePoint related. This is records management. Oh, we will use this tool and we will architect these pieces. And somebody will say, fine, you go off, and the other architects go off and start writing the first draft. Okay. Now, I don't want to write anything because I'm already busy with my day job. Right. And they give me 2 weeks. I go off and start writing. And turns out that I don't know about my colleagues. I'm not a good writer. So 2 weeks go by. And then we are expected to come back to this meeting with what we have written. And that's when the yelling begins because they don't like what we have written. Everybody has written it differently. And of course, I am overemphasizing on all of the projects that I have worked on. And same is true with my colleagues. And there's a rich set of experience library, but I'm only focused on the ones I've worked on, right? Because that's what I know best. So now 2 weeks have gone by and really a draft is there, which is like poor quality draft, which reads like 10 people have written it. And now you've only 2 more weeks left to the final submission.
Right.
And it is often said that proposals are won either at the beginning or the end. What they mean is either at the beginning, you understand that you're going to win, you put the right team in place, or at the end, if you have enough time left, you want to take a step back and think about what should be a creative pricing strategy. Who else would be bidding this, right? How can I ghost my competition? If you do those things, your chances of winning goes up. But the sad reality of proposal writing is you spend most of the time in the middle, chasing the first draft, chasing the second draft. So the value proposition for the tool, and especially designed for people like me, you have taken all of your past performances, stored them in a library, and then when the RFP arrives, our engine, Pwin engine, will take a look at the RFP, parse it down into what is exactly being asked, and then rather than having to write 10 pages of prose and return it, you're really dealing at a higher level. You're providing hints to our model. We call it flight plan. And very creative, right? If we are calling ourselves Copilot, flight plan seems to be logical. So
see what I did there.
So you set up a flight plan, which is really, and this is Richard and Carl. This is where I think this is a very key concept in my mind. Again, looking back, it seems trivial, but this is one of the concepts that we landed on earlier on that has served us well. So if you think of calling yourself a Copilot, which means we are not here to replace the proposal writers. These people have gained experience and skill over many, many years. We are here to augment them. And how do they work with the model without becoming a prompt experts themselves or without becoming experts in a RAG pattern? What we ask them to do is we ask them to fill out a flight plan. Essentially, tell us in great fidelity, how should we be responding? So these are the solutions we want to incorporate. Here are the win themes. We think we are differentiated because we are the best Microsoft partner in the world. What are the pain points? If you really know the customer, you should know their motivation for issuing this RFP. So you provide that vision in the form of a flight plan. And then our engine will take that flight plan and then generate these prompts dynamically, as we talked about. And then generate a 20, 30, 40 page response. And why 20, 30, 40 pages? Because that's what's been asked. And that was the other innovation. If you go to any other Copilot, you'll end up getting 1 or 2 pages. Even ChatGPT, if you ask a complex question, it will say, hey, this is a complex question. Let me just tell you how you can get to this answer. In our case, we can't tell our users how you can get to an answer. They want to see 20 pages. So we have to, like I was saying earlier, these language models, as good they are, they tend to forget things in the middle. So it's our job to take 2 requirements, give it to the language model, get them to generate something, and evaluate it at the end of that and see if they really answered the question. If not, send it back again. Now you have section 1, you do that for section 2, section 3, and sort of you do that repeatedly. And that's why people ask me, why is it taking you guys 4 or 5 hours to generate a 20-page document? And When I ask a question of ChatGPT, it gives me an answer in seconds. Why is it taking you 4 or 5 hours? Well, the answer is that we are having to iterate over the content that's being developed. And at every step of the way, we are evaluating it for the sake of completeness. And by the way, we also do hallucination checks as the content is being generated.
Right.
Yeah, you have to. Without that human to check things out, your customers can't just expect you to plug stuff in and copy and paste out of a chat bot,
Right. And so
I'd be angry.
Hallucination checks that's why very important. And, going back to my example, Carl, the RFP is asking for companies who have done a 5,000 or a 50,000 node, migration to the cloud. And that's what and now the text that was generated says you have done 5,000 node migration.
Yeah.
We can't find a reference to a 5,000 node migration in your entire past history. So we would say, hey, you may want to go double check this.
Well, how effective has it been in generating proposals?
So, you should ask our customers that. But one.
Well, it sounds like they're happy with it.
Yeah, I think a lot more work needs to be done. Obviously, language models building a production grade application with language models is hard because they have their own personality. When Microsoft goes from 4 to 4 Turbo to 4 Omni, there's some personality aspect of these language models can change, and we have to account for that. Especially if you're generating a multi-layer prompt, you have to account for that. So it takes some additional time. But so far, we have had customers who have said that we have accelerated their timelines, given them more time.
You said you reached out to a dozen customers. Were they all pretty happy with what they got?
So I didn't complete the story. We built an MVP. We went to a dozen customers and said, we just want you to try our product. We didn't even have a UI at that point, right? And because what's the point of the UI if the content is not of the quality where it is helping you with saving time and improving the outcomes, right? So we went to them, got some really good feedback, added more capabilities, got the UI, and of course our UI is SharePoint, because it turns out that 80 to 90% of proposal writers live in SharePoint. So why should we build something outside an environment that they're already in?
Why blow against the wind?
Yeah. So then, Richard, what we did was back in February or March, this has been a very fast-moving thing. In 9 months, we said, okay, we're going to offer this in a commercial manner as a paid service. And we went to many of those original beta customers. Many of them signed up. So we're at this point running several production customers who are paying customers of ours. And I'm really proud to say that Microsoft's own Proposal Center of Excellence. So Microsoft has this group called the Global Proposal Center of Excellence. We went through an evaluation with them, and they just onboarded as the tool.
Wow!
Congratulations!
So, congrats!
Yeah,
that's great.
And gentlemen, we should pause for one moment for these very important messages. And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey,
here with our friend Vishwas Lele, now the lead on this new Pwin company. And obviously, your MVP's gone well. You've done some initial testing. I'll throw my sysadmin hat on because I've talked to a lot of CTO, CIO types who are looking at these technologies, and they keep being told by Microsoft, you should have your, quote, data estate in order. Like, what I'm afraid of with the generalized tools like this is that your data estate is not in order. And so data is going to be pulled into the model and then subsequently revealed in prompts that everyone's going to be very unhappy about. And it's not like a sign pops out of a server somewhere when your data estate is in order. You don't know. It's like your system should be secure. It's just as impossible. Like one of the things that appeals to me about your approach to this is you're encapsulating the data set. And arguably, you're taking that responsibility. You're saying, we're the folks who will make sure that the data that appears in the model is appropriate. I mean, I'm just wondering how much of work is that for you?
Yeah, that's a huge amount of work. If I had to look back, we've spent thousands of hours data science hours in building the multi-layer prompt engine.
Right.
And I would say an equal amount of time in worrying about ingestion of the data. And now, fortunately for us, this is why a domain-specific copilot made sense, because you're limiting the data set, right? Some of the things that you're talking about is you might have hundreds of thousands of documents in SharePoint and stored somewhere on OneDrive, and that one document which nobody has found until now, you can be sure that M365 Copilot would find it, and somebody asks a question, that question will get answered inappropriately because that document was available, but nobody knew about that document. In our case, it helped that we limit the kind of data that goes into the engine, right? And as I mentioned, your past RFP submissions, your white papers, and things like CPARs, which is a government-issued document which says you have worked on these technologies, well-structured. So we limit ourselves to those documents. We do things like many of these proposals include resumes of people, and we exclude those resumes because now your experience from a previous employer might pollute your current employer's data. So we exclude that. So as part of the ingestion, Richard, we break the documents down into logical sections. We use the language models for some classification even. So we don't have human taggers to say, this is a management plan, this is an executive summary. We're using language models to do some tagging of the documents themselves.
I'm seeing this now inside of Purview, Microsoft's, and again, this is IT conversation, where it's getting really good at calling out PII even before you got around to tagging it. It knows the shape of identifiable information.
So starting with a limited data set helped us, and that may not be applicable to other people here. And frankly, that's the challenge that Microsoft had with M365 Copilot, because you have everything. And of course, they have added capabilities like, hey, don't include these documents in my index or leave this library out.
Right.
So obviously, those governance controls have come into play. In our case, we started with a small data set, but even then, it was really important to parse it. I'll give you an example. You might partner with a company when you're applying for a certain piece of work. That company may end up teaming with a competitor of yours in a subsequent RFP. Now, if you've taken their content and included it into your knowledge base, chances are that that content will show up. So you have to be careful about that in terms of how you're using maybe partners' data. So all of those things, Richard, apply. And we are breaking that content down. Again, I talked about entities, and then we use those for our content generation.
I got a question. Did you, and you may have said this early on and I didn't hear it, but we're using Microsoft Copilot Studio to create your
we're not using Microsoft Copilot Studio.
Have you used it?
I've used it, but we started our development well before Copilot Studio. And secondly, our response engine at this point is so complicated that we needed to go directly build things in Python, in Azure machine learning notebooks, and things like that.
Gotcha.
I mean, what I like about this is you clearly brought your own meta understanding of RFP writing to the tool set.
That's right.
To then make into a product that works well for individual companies against their data. But, there's three pieces here. There is the language model as it stands. There is the understanding of the rules of writing RFPs effectively and applying those. And then there is the data set that is the companies for what their capabilities are and how they want to respond to RFPs. Like those, you need all of those things. It's not, there's no magic wand here. Smart people had to work really hard to make this work.
Yeah.
But when it works, the fact that you're going to be able to respond to more RFPs and to write better responses, like this is money in the bank if done right.
If done right. And I should add one other thing, which I should have mentioned earlier. I believe that in order to develop any effective AI solution, you have to ML engineering, of course, that's a given. But then you have to bring domain expertise. And you alluded to that we brought some domain expertise. But,
yes.
But we are not experts in proposal writing, right? So what we did, Richard, early on is we went to a company called Shipley. Shipley, and you may not be familiar with them if you're not in the proposal space, but Stephen Shipley, 50 years ago, wrote the book on proposal writing, right? And really an influential book in terms of how should you be thinking about your RFP responses. And that translated into a company. People can go to shipleywins.com, 50-year-old company. And their job it is to teach classes about better proposal writing, teach nuances of writing compliant proposals. And when you need a surge capacity, they make their consultants available.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So they're literally the business around it.
That's the business around it. So we went to them and we said, we are a tech company. We of course write our own proposals, but we are nowhere near the subject matter expertise and the name that you have. And we would like to partner you to be co-creators of this tool for us, right? And Shipley had never partnered with a company. And I was clear that I'm not just looking for a referral partnership that, hey, recommend us. I want you to be joining the team so that you're constantly helping us improve the prompts. You're bringing that domain expertise. And they went through their own evaluation, Richard, for a period of time. They looked at other tools and very proud to say that they decided to join in as an exclusive partner, as a co-creation partner, right? And having them on our engineering scrums and saying, generate this content in this manner. Because what is very interesting about proposal writing is if you don't write it in a certain manner, right, there you are restating the problem, you're saying you've done these things in the past, you're reinforcing the point. There's a certain format, and proposal writers tend to be very persnickety about that. Right? Yes. If you don't follow that format,
you did it wrong.
All bets are off, right?
Yeah.
And to the three of us, if you read one page of highly curated proposal writing ready stuff and then some other stuff, you would say, hey, reasonable people can argue about it. Oh, yeah, your sentence is here, your reference is here, but they don't like that, right? They want the format to be exactly. So how do you write content that is persuasive, that follows a structure, and having a domain expert like them? So fortunate to have them. They've taught people the process, the methodology, the best practices.
I'm betting they're testing, like that they're evaluating the output.
Absolutely.
I did a show on Run As with Lynn Langett not that long ago. We called The Hard Part of Machine Learning. It's like test. Like you've got to evaluate these outputs. Right. And it takes experts to even know what's good and what's bad.
It takes experts, and you cannot use just ChatGPT to say which section is better, right? Because it requires experience, skill, all of that. So they're helping us with testing. They're helping us write this. So that was an important partnership. And that's maybe one tip to the listeners out there that in order for an AI solution to be effective, you can't just have 5 smart engineers go to any domain and say, I have a solution for your problem because I know Azure ML and Python better than you. Well, that does not matter.
No.
You know my problem set.
Well, there's plenty of smart developers that have built quality software that was wrong because they didn't have the domain experts involved to make the right thing. Yeah. This is the same role, just at a different place in some respects. You're not qualified to evaluate this output. You need an expert to evaluate this output.
So having that, I was just finishing that other point that you succinctly made, which is it's really important to have a domain expertise. And I was just adding that our expertise was not enough alone. And we needed to partner with the best in the business to do that. And we're fortunate to have them.
I mean, I've got to think there's somebody who's made their career out of writing great RFPs. This is still pretty threatening. You know, like they, at least, but admittedly, you present it the right way. It's like, it's only going to give you a draft. We're going to need your help, like every time. Right. It needs to still be read.
Yeah, Richard, that's a good point. And at some level, we are all concerned about the societal impact of generative AI and all of the things that we do. But the way I present it, two important points. One is, remember the notion of flight plan that I talked about. an expert proposal writer can quickly fill out the flight plan, because think about that. You're setting the vision, or you're setting the intellectual momentum for you to win. Without a vision, nobody is winning any RFPs, right? And this is where the proposal directors or proposal writers come in, and they fill out the flight plan. And we've been talking to them about how their job changes with generative AI, where they are operating at the object layer. We talk to them about objects. And then we are dealing at the words level, right? Yeah, they're changing the objects and attributes and methods maybe, but then we are generating all the code for them. In other words, we are generating all the words for them. So that's one. And it is a model-driven architecture in the sense that you change the flight plan, you look at the content, and you feel like, hey, this came out pretty flat. Let me go back and change the flight plan and regenerate, right? So it's a model-driven architecture, and the better they get it with that setup, they can make these quick changes. That's one. The second important point is we are not claiming authorship, right? I get this request from some people that, hey, can we use your tool? Our knowledge repository is pretty sparse. We have not done this type of a work. Can you help us generate good content? And well, this is not cheating as a service. You can't just push a button and you get a proposal response, right? If you don't have good past performances, if you don't have good background, if you don't have creative architects who can come up with good creative solutions to the problem, chances are that what we generate is going to look very flat to you. So we're not claiming authorship. Those things have to be in place for an organization to be able to use our tool. So
do you ask your customers when you give a proposal, do you mind if we use this as and feed it back into the machine, so as training data?
So Carl, one important thing to note is we are not training the models. And this is a question that I get asked often. We're not training the model at all because it's not like your data is going to be trained and then used for someone else.
But you do use those as
yes,
data,
we use them. We use them in a RAG manner where we.
Right. And so I was just about to say, this is retrieval augmented generation. So the model is the model. You're using RAG to add the additional.
I would say you still have to ask permission. Right?
Yeah. So just to be clear, if somebody acquires our tool, they go through an onboarding stage where we look at the documents and we tell them some best practices, and then we ingest those documents. Of course, that's their asset and that data belongs to them. And when our engine runs, it dynamically makes a call into this database to look for right pieces of information. So, of course, we are using their data, but then we dynamically call into this engine. If there is no results to be returned because they have not done this kind of work, they don't have any white papers on that technology, then it's going to return pretty flat results. And we can't infuse that content back into language models and generate the content appropriately.
Okay. So Vishwas, what's on your to-do list? What's next?
Well, the next is to continue to improve the product. That's what I'm focused on for the foreseeable future. Take advantage of all of the amazing enhancements that are coming to the language model space. What I love about this is this allows me to tap into all of the Azure work that I've done in the last 10 years, because ultimately, language model is just one service. There are 38 other Azure services that are powering this solution. So a lot of things that we have learned over the last 10 years with the community are coming into play. So continue to see how far we can take this, how we can support our customers better. So that's what next for me.
Fantastic. Hey, it's always great to talk to you. We always learn something. We always get a new perspective on AI when we talk to you. And thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a